Hey, Holly, welcome to the show. It's awesome to have you.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Holly, you have a quite an amazing story and also this background with a challenge of being a spouse who dealt with a husband that was in addiction. It's a different addiction than what we typically talk about on this show, right? My audience is all pornography addiction, but it is so much the same in so many ways. I once dealt with alcoholism myself, and so I know how similar that was in the dynamics that I went through in my own life. So I want to start with this. So much of this episode is speaking to those who are in addiction, but so much to their spouses who are going through the pain of watching their spouse go through that and how to be there for them and how to communicate with them, etc. So I'm excited for what we're going to talk about and how it's going to help people. So thank you for
Yeah,
being here.
thank you.
Can you share kind of about your story? Your husband was struggling with alcoholism. When did it become apparent to you, this is really an issue? This isn't just something that he's kind of going through. This has become a major problem for our family. And what did that look like?
Sure. So, at one point in this journey, he actually came to me and said, "Okay, I think I do have a problem." And, I just trusted him fully, completely. So I said, "Oh, okay." I wanted to be supportive. And I was very naive and uneducated on this topic and this issue. So I didn't do a lot of digging. I just said, "Okay, what do you need?" And he said, "Well, I've already looked into it. There's a detox center near the house, and I'll go there for as long as I need, whatever they recommend, and I'll come home, and I think that that's going to be the solution." Right. So I said, "Oh, okay,
Mm,
great."
yeah, it'll be one
So
and done. It'll be over, and then I can move
yeah,
on with the rest of my life, right?
exactly. And that's what I believed.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I didn't really know at that point how deep he was into his addiction. All I knew is that, okay, I've seen some evidence that there's an issue, and he's telling me there's an issue. This is what he says the solution is. So he does. He goes to detox. He comes home 3 days later. And we went out to dinner that evening. I think it was a Friday night. So we as a family went out to dinner, and he looked at the waitress and said, "Can I have a beer?" And so my heart sank in that moment. And I thought, I don't know much about alcoholism. Like, I know nothing. But what I do know is that this just doesn't feel right. I don't think this is normal. I don't think you're supposed to come home from detox and the same day order a beer. That just doesn't sit well with me. And it did hit me at that moment that, okay, I think we are dealing with something much bigger and something that doesn't just involve him as far as the solution, because clearly he doesn't have the answers. So that would mean that I would need to be involved, but I just don't know how
Yeah.
or why. Like, I knew nothing beyond that except for how I felt in that moment. And that crossed my mind, and that's it. That's all I knew.
Mhm. It's difficult to be in that position and to wonder how do I show up for them? How do I help? I think a lot of spouses go through this battle of, okay, I need to control you or like make you
Yeah.
make different decisions so that you stop suffering. And I don't want to watch you suffer anymore. And it's causing me suffering too. And so, how did that begin to kind of escalate for you guys? And um, yeah. What was that like? Did that was that several years that you guys went through this of his alcoholism, continuing to spiral or progress and then it impacting you and your family? How many kids did you actually have at this point?
Sure. Yes. So we had three
Yeah.
kids.
Okay. So they're in yours
And
too, yeah. Mm.
yeah, and so I guess I just want to say, in the beginning of the relationship, I didn't grow up around alcohol at all. My parents didn't drink. The people that they associated with, my family members, no one drank.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what normal was. I didn't know if a glass of wine occasionally was normal, or vodka every night, as long as you act right and you're appropriate and you are there for your family. I just didn't know, and I didn't judge, and I didn't question it. But he was, of course, in the beginning, a great guy, and we had a good relationship, and he was a very hands-on dad. He was a good dad. And he provided for our family. He went to work, he came home, he made dinner, he did all of the things. I would say maybe 4 or 5 years in is when I started to see some behavioral changes.
Mm.
I would
Mhm.
say, and this is why, pornography addiction, gambling addiction, they all, it's a different vice, right? It's a different addiction, but a lot of the behaviors are the same.
Yep. Yeah.
And so it was, I started noticing that alcohol was a priority. That if he didn't have it, if he ran out, if the store closed before he could go get more and stock up, that I'd noticed a change in attitude, that he would become
Mm.
irritable.
Mhm.
And eventually it was like a total personality shift. I felt like he was nitpicking at me. Like he was in a bad mood all the time. This easygoing guy was not easygoing anymore. Felt like he was always on edge and unhappy. And I looked to myself like, okay, what am I doing wrong? I must be causing this. There's something that I'm not doing or that I'm doing wrong that's making him upset, that is the root of all of this. I just didn't connect the dots. And it really, really didn't hit me that alcohol was the problem until he had some health issues come up. So the first thing that happened was I was at work. He called me and he said, I'm not feeling well and have this rash on my abdomen, this strange kind of like prickly rash.
Ah, is that candida infection?
It was his kidneys shutting down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor um, got him a bed at the local hospital. The doctor called me and said, hey, this is alcohol related. And he was in the hospital for a few days at that point. And actually, at this point, I'm pregnant with my third. And so I have a lot on my plate. I think I was like 8 months pregnant at this point. And,
Yes. Yeah.
he told me that, um, it really wasn't a big deal. Maybe he drank too much and that caused like system overload, and his kidneys didn't process it well. And he just needed to go get hydrated. And when you go to the hospital, when you're a patient in the hospital, they are treating the acute issues. They're really not there to, bring the social worker in and dive into your issues and set up a plan when you get home. They just want to patch you up, band-aid you, and send you on home. And that's what they did. And so, being that this was really the first incident, I took him at his word that, okay, we're going to get through this. Things are going to be better. You're going to be patched up. You're going to go home. Of course, on some level, that didn't sit well with me. But look, I'm 8 months pregnant. This is what he's telling me. Everything he's told me in the past has been the truth. And so that was definitely a brighter red flag, though, because I think the red flags, they start out really faint. and and you dismiss them. It's so easy to dismiss the red flags when they're faint. I'd say they're like pink, right? They're not bright
That's what I
red.
was gonna say. They're pink flags.
They're
Yeah.
pink, and you just sort of like
Yeah.
shove it under the rug, and whatever they tell you, you want to believe. And so you believe it and you move on and you continue to see more and they become brighter. But we kind of become desensitized, I think. And also, I don't think this is intentional, but I feel like the addict goes through sort of like it's like they're grooming you. That's how I felt. Like I'm being groomed
Yeah. Yeah.
to just accept what he says, like, because there's some gaslighting and manipulation. And I don't think it was intentional. It's more like a defense mechanism that he had, right? To explain this away and to tell me that, I'm imagining things or I'm blowing things out of proportion. So as these flags start getting brighter and now they're red, of course I'm going to look to him to dismiss it because that's been the pattern. And so
Yeah.
that's what I did, and, it really wasn't until I think it was Oh, it was several years later. We went on a beach trip. We had a great time. We came home and we're just sort of at this point in the routine of I'm getting used to his new personality. Sometimes he's the old Steve and sometimes he's irritable Steve, but that's just sort of what I've become accustomed to. And I'm just sort of surviving. I'm in survival mode, right? And I'm hoping things will get better. And he becomes ill. And I thought that he had the flu. He was at home in bed for 16 hours for sleeping for 16 hours a day for about a week. Stopped eating, stopped drinking. I went in one morning and I noticed that he was jaundice. And so he went to the hospital and they, of course, ran all sorts of tests. And they said not only are his kidneys shutting down again, but his liver is shutting down. He's an acute liver failure. And they didn't give me much information beyond that. You know, they were working on Steve's. He was obviously like not in a good place physically with his health. And so I had to go home and tend to the kids. I come back the next day, he's in an induced coma.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
What
so
what is what is your emotion like at that point?
I was still confused because, of course, I know on some level that, okay, maybe this is alcohol related, but it's still, I felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me and I had my blinders on. So this doctor comes in and she sits down with me and she tells me, this is what's going on. You've got to stop being this 1950s housewife with your head in the sand. Your husband is a severe alcoholic. We're going to do some further lab tests. I wouldn't be surprised if he has cirrhosis. He's 34, by the way, at this time. So he's very young.
Mm,
She also proceeds to tell me that she's not sure that he's going to survive this, that his chances are very slim coming out of this. And so, of course, like I'm devastated, I'm confused. And it's really then that I had to start processing and coming to grips with everything that I had seen, that those were red flags and that I needed to come to terms with the severity of this situation. And she told me, if he does come out of this, he needs to go to treatment. He needs to go to, I would send him to Betty Ford. There's a Betty Ford in Oregon where we lived at the time. And so he was hospitalized in an induced coma for 3 months. And I thought he's going to wake up from this and he's going to be so grateful that he survived this. And that's not what happened. Steve took a 3-month nap, right? Like he had no memory of what happened. He didn't know why he was there. And he certainly did not connect the dots. He didn't choose to get help. This was just brought upon him because he was in multi-organ failure.
oh my
And they brought
gosh.
him out of it. So, I thought certainly like this is going to be the rock bottom moment.
Yeah,
And for me, it was. I learned a
right.
lot. I learned so much. I started doing a lot of research. And I spent a lot of time at the hospital talking to the doctors. And I just thought this is going to be it. And yeah, unfortunately, it was not. So that is when I knew and understood the full scope of what was happening.
You'd think that, when it comes to rock bottom moments, like there are ways that could get more extreme, I suppose, but that's pretty much as extreme as it gets. You almost died. You were in a coma
Yeah,
for 3 months. This has
yeah,
gone on long enough. But that is not necessarily the case for
right,
people, right?
right.
And less intense things can happen actually and be that rock bottom moment where they finally have a realization and they're like, okay, I got to change this, right? But for
Yeah,
him, he didn't connect with that. So he continues then in his alcoholism after that point. Is that right?
yes, definitely. He does. He does continue. And we then go on this revolving door journey. We are in and out of treatment facilities and we are in and out of the ICU every 6 weeks to 2 months. We're in and out of
Goodness
the
sakes.
ICU, on death's door again. And this goes on until 2017. So It's 3 years of in and out of the ICU and in and out of treatment facilities until he passed away.
Oh, and
Yeah.
oh my goodness. That so for you, you come out of this. What are well, you're obviously devastated at that point with grief, I would
Mhm.
imagine, and now you're a single mother of 3 children. Do you have any help at that point in facing that scenario?
I didn't have a lot of help at all throughout this whole journey.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem, trying to, before he passed away, that was part of the issue, and that's why I talk a lot about red flags and trusting your gut, because, as I mentioned before, there was this sort of grooming process when I did see pink flags for me to, like, push them under the rug, and we're just gonna move forward, and look ahead. And there was a lot of unintentional, gaslighting and manipulation that happened. And I didn't trust my gut. And his family is also, his parents are also, would say, high functioning alcoholics. So I had not only him, but his parents telling me that I was blowing things out of
Mm,
proportion,
mhm. Yeah,
and saying things that are inappropriate. And I was questioning my own sanity.
yeah,
And so the importance of red flags are not just so that you can recognize them and realize that you're not the problem, that there is a bigger issue going on, but so that as soon as you recognize it, then you can step in and help this person who's struggling to get to the other side, but neither of you can get there if you also don't recognize that this is a problem. And so that was part of the uphill battle, was just not having a lot of support because his family was in addiction and I didn't have family that lived near me at the time. So that was definitely tough.
and, it makes me think of the term, I'm sure you've heard it, crazy making, right? Where we as addicts, and I don't like to use that label term at all, but those of us who've struggled with addiction,
Yeah.
I know that I did plenty of that in my day. And I like that you say the unintentional gaslighting, because
Yeah.
I work in the realm of unconscious emotion. It's just like my day to day with clients, where it's like, let's explore the unconscious emotions and patterns that are underneath. I gaslighted plenty, but I was gaslighting myself at the same
Exactly.
time, right?
Exactly. It's what you believe. I don't believe that there's this conscious decision to I don't think that the individual sits down and plots,
Right.
as to
Most people
how
don't do that.
no, as to how they're going to convince you that you're crazy and that, there's not an issue. Um, that's what they believe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I wanna dive into your book, but I do actually, kind of for my own sake of curiosity, come around to where you're at now. That's 2017. So 8 years later, right? Is your life good now?
It is, yes.
Good.
Yeah,
Yes.
a common question I'm asked is, "How are you so normal? You're so calm and you're happy and
Yeah.
you're normal."
Yeah.
Um, the kids help with that. I wasn't always in that place. I wasn't. I remember, because I got married young and I had the kids young and I didn't have a lot of close friends. I poured everything into at home, my
Yeah.
husband, the kids. And so I
Yeah.
had friends, but I wouldn't say I didn't have a lot of people that I could call, in the middle of the
Yeah.
day to come over and pick me up off the floor when I'm having a meltdown, right?
Totally.
So I do remember moments, especially, when he would go back into the hospital yet again, and I was told he's probably not going to come out of this. Just to be honest with you, there were times that I thought, okay, if that happens today or if he doesn't come home, I'm going to commit suicide. I would say I was
Yeah,
suicidal. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, of
Mhm.
course.
Throughout this process, I just thought like, not that I didn't want to live, but I just didn't want to feel this way anymore. And I thought that may be the solution to this. So I was in a very, very, very dark place.
Yeah.
And all I can say is that's because, you feel so out of control. When you're going through something that you can't control, you feel out of control. And your world is crashing down. And somehow, when the worst happens, and it did, somehow I mustered up some strength, and I don't know how, but it just happened. And I just think that naturally does occur with anyone. I think in the moments leading up to it, you're like, I'm not going to survive this. I can't do it. I can't get through this. And somehow, in a way that I can't explain, uh, you do. You go into survival mode and you start just putting one foot in front of the other, and everything miraculously does come together. It's a work in progress. You do have to work on yourself. So there's some self talk and self care that you have to do to maintain that and to continually get to a better place. So that's something that I do. I just, every morning, it's a conscious decision. And it was from the beginning, I'm going to choose to eat well today. This is what I'm going to put in my body as far as nutrition so that I can feel good mentally, physically, and just making the small choices so that the other stuff can happen. And that's really all we can control in the beginning, but it's a really good first step.
Yeah. No, I think it's crucial, in the men that I work with and then their spouses that are going through so much, it's that there's a lot to be said for that self-care. Like, if your spouse is struggling with addiction, it's almost more important that you take good care of yourself, your health and your nutrition, your mental and emotional health, your spiritual health, all of these things, taking good care of yourself. And so, well, good. I think that's amazing. What an incredible journey and a lot of pain. And so this obviously going through this, and I know from our previous conversation, you didn't immediately then jump into writing your book, The Hardest Help. It was actually quite a bit later. So, what was that process like? What kind of motivated you to, okay, I'm gonna do this? Uh, and I know from our previous conversation, it's anyway. I'd love for you to talk about what that was like deciding to write this book and what that was motivated by.
Sure. I think a a lot of people think you process as you're going through something, but you don't, and you're not. You're just surviving. You're trying to survive. So every day you're putting out whatever the biggest fire is of the day.
Yeah,
And that's how we lived for a long time. And when he passed away, it was the same thing. I had to figure out Social Security for the kids because I wasn't working at the time. I wasn't working. And then I had to um, revamp my career and focus on that. And so I wasn't able to just grieve and process. I'd say, gosh, at least a year after is when I felt like, okay, things have kind of calmed down and I can actually take some time to myself to just have some quiet time and reflect on what happened. And I needed to go back and think about, how did we get here? What could I have done differently? And I think I'd mentioned to you before, maybe not, but several months before Steve passed, I came across some methods that were pretty effective in moving the needle and in moving Steve forward so that he could see that there was an issue and that it was critical for him to go back and get some treatment. Because all of the methods that I had tried previously, the yelling, the threats, the ultimatums, none of that worked. Rock bottom is a myth. That didn't work, obviously. But these other methods, I found these to be effective, and we were moving forward and we were getting there. And then ultimately, pretty unexpectedly, his liver failed again, and this time it was not something that could be patched up, and he passed away. Having said that, as I was, fast forward to several years after he passed, and I'm reflecting on everything that happened, it really hit me. It really dawned on me that, my gosh, so these methods, if I had known then, and I say then, like years earlier, what I know now, I think that the outcome would be different. He may be here today. And it really goes back to not just the methods of, how do we move this person toward recovery, but it also goes back to my own mindset and recognizing red flags, and then what do we do when we recognize red flags? How do we respond? If I knew then that information, that would be a game changer. Um, instead of yelling and pointing the finger, what would be a more effective method? How could I use positive reinforcement to bring about change? And how can I change my own mindset and how I respond to get a different response? If I had known all of that then, whereas prior, like I said, I think we would be in a different place. So that's when I realized, oh my gosh, there are millions of families that need this information also, that are suffering like I did. And why would I gatekeep this information? I need to get it out to everyone. Everyone needs to read this. I also wanted to share my personal story because it's so isolating. And when you're going through something that is difficult to talk about with your family members, your friends, you certainly can't go to work and talk to your coworkers about something like this.
Mhm.
It's just lonely. It's so lonely. So I wanted to be someone that you can connect with and see yourself in my story. And really, regardless of where you're at in your journey with that person's addiction, I have solutions for you, and I talk about it all. So, from the very beginning to the end, I cover everything so that regardless of where you are at in your journey, you can relate to me and my story and look for solutions, from beginning, middle, and end that I share. So that was really important. And also, I don't hold back in this book. Usually when there's an addiction involved, regardless of the type of addiction, um, not always, but sometimes there can be like emotional abuse involved. With alcohol, it's very common. There can be physical abuse, not always, but it's common. Um, there can be some things that go on in the house, and this is true with me, that the kids should never see. And I talk about all of those scenarios. I really, really went there. We had some things, some scary situations in the house, and I detailed it all because I felt like it was just unfair for me to not just rip off the Band-Aid and expose it all. All of the ghetto drama in the house, here it is, because if you're going through that, you don't want to feel like, oh, this is just me. Like, is this just me going through this right now? So I wanted to say, nope, it's not just you, and this is what happened with me, and I hope that you can feel some comfort in my story.
I think that's what most of us feel like in those scenarios. We feel isolated. We feel like, I must be the only one experiencing this,
Yeah.
or what you said earlier, is it my fault? Is there something I have to change? I obviously, again, that crazy making kind of feeling like maybe I'm the one who's crazy. Maybe I'm the one who's got
Yeah.
problems. And that's why this is happening. And it
Mhm.
feels deeply isolating. And to have someone be raw and real and open about those struggles and be like, here's what I faced, it helps people just really feel connected. They're not alone. That's
Yeah.
powerful, really powerful. And so you said that waiting for rock bottom is not the answer. It's a myth, as you say, and I like that. I think it's
Yeah.
great. What are some healthier, earlier interventions a spouse can make that truly help?
First and foremost, I think you do have to do the work on yourself. You have to, um, first of all, you have to educate yourself on the addiction. And then you have to become the person that can help that other person. Like they
Mm,
say, you have to put on your air mask first before you can help that other person. You have to be in that space, or else it's not going to work. Right. So that's really important. Um,
and do you think a lot of that journey, Holly, kind of your own processing of, your emotional health and things like that of being able to become strong in who you are and confident about who you are and being able to regulate your own emotions, is that the kind of the realm you're speaking in, or?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I actually really I talk a lot about that in my book.
Mhm.
And, some things that can help. Because if you know, okay, we don't want them to hit rock bottom, the yelling and screaming isn't working, confrontations, that's not working, addressing the elephant in the room and saying, well, if you didn't drink so much, that doesn't work, right? That's a natural response. It's normal. It's what we think works because, we're not the one with the addiction. So if someone says to us, hey, this look what's happening, we can see it. Um, but in addiction, often self-awareness is a struggle, and especially with if it's a substance such as drugs or alcohol, that frontal lobe that's responsible for things like self-awareness, um, that's diminished, that's
Yeah,
damaged,
and
and so they just
same with porn as well, yeah. It's
yeah, right.
extremely similar. Yep.
Exactly. So, because they have a hard time connecting those dots between, what they're doing, whether it's, consuming porn or, drinking alcohol or using drugs and the natural consequence that occurs, they just don't make that connection. And so that's something that we have to help them with, that we can help them with. So we can't control someone, but we can control how we respond. And so that's that self work that I'm talking about. You need to work on how you respond. And that takes some prep and practice. So, one thing that I suggest is journaling. I think journaling is really important. It sounds corny, and some people are like eye rolling right now. Journaling. Yes, journaling for a number of reasons. One, we know the off the cuff responses haven't worked. But that's what got us in trouble in the first place with, whether it's name calling or yelling, right? Like we know that doesn't work. And if we want to try something new, then it's going to be something we have to practice and we have to be really intentional about. And so that's why journaling is really important. What's happening? First of all, you probably need to process and think about, okay, what is happening? What's a common scenario that we keep running into, or a conversation that I would like the outcome to change. So you need to think about that. And what is your message? What's your goal? What kind of response are you looking for? What are we trying to achieve here? And then practice it. I used to literally, like in the bathroom in the mirror, I would be like, okay, this is the conversation I know that's coming. This is the goal. This is what I want to achieve. And so let me work on my message. And I would sort of like practice my delivery.
That's awesome.
I know it sounds
That's
really
awesome.
cheesy, but it
No.
works.
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure that like you're grounded and you're calm and you know what's coming. You know that resistance is probably coming. And
Yeah.
so working on that, that's really helpful. Um, And one thing that I'll share that was helpful when I said, in those months leading up to him passing, that I was able to kind of like move the needle and move forward, because before he was so reluctant to going into treatment for the amount of recommended time. They wanted him to stay for 6 months. So it was 4 months of intensive inpatient treatment. And then it was several months of you're there at the facility um, for, X amount of hours a day, and then you go home for X amount of hours a day. And so kind of it was a transition period. And so it was going to be a total of 6 months. That was very scary to him. That was something that he didn't want to do. And, he was reluctant, and it felt
Mm,
like I was just being met with resistance the whole way. Something that's extremely common, that almost always happens, is you bring it up, and not only are they resistant to treatment, but they're resistant to talking about it altogether, or, the idea that they need any help. Um, what I did, a couple of methods that work. First of all, to stop conversations that are so confrontational and just get curious and ask open-ended questions. So, whether it's about pornography or alcohol or whatever substance, whatever addiction that they have, to ask questions about them and just to get them talking. Because regardless of the addiction, if someone is in addiction, they don't just struggle with that impulse control. They struggle probably with anxiety, depression, right? There are a lot of things that come along with the addiction that they don't like, that they wish that they didn't have to deal with. They're
yeah.
not happy in this situation. They don't necessarily want to quit the addiction, right? They don't want to give up what they think is making them feel better.
Yeah, it's their solace, it's their escape, their comfort, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't wanna give that up, but they don't wanna feel this way. So, asking about their day, asking about their struggles. And I think initially, and this is where, some people, they get antsy and they're like, "Well, it didn't work the first time, so it doesn't work." It does. That first time you have that conversation, this person that's struggling with the addiction is probably so used to you coming at them all the time.
Yeah.
And that first time that you ask curious questions and you're, asking them about, their depression and anxiety, things that you haven't really touched on before, you're probably not going to be met with an open conversation on the other side. It may take several conversations to get them to put their walls down and to talk about their anxiety, their depression, or, it could be, gosh, every job that I go for, I'm not getting to that second interview, because maybe they lost their job because of their addiction, for example. Or they're just not happy in their job. They want a better job. It's just not happening. Talking about the why, but not you telling them, you getting them to tell their why, and getting them to see how their actions and their outcomes, what they want, those things don't line up. Those things don't match up. And so over time, they'll start to see that, okay, what I want and what I'm doing, those things don't align, right? Positive reinforcement is also very effective. So I think, we talked about boundaries before, and I want to touch on that really quick, because I think I'm going off on a tangent, but this has to do with it, I promise.
No, it's
people
great.
people
This was actually gonna be my next question was
Yeah,
about
I think
boundaries, so
I think some people, boundaries, they're confused as to what the purpose of boundaries. What is the purpose of boundaries, right? I think some kind of see it as their excuse to induce punishment.
yeah.
Like, well, you haven't quit XYZ, so therefore this is what I'm going to do. And boundaries are not meant to be a punishment. Both of you need boundaries on either side, right? Like, you need boundaries so that what you're doing, because you're involved with this person with the addiction, you're comfortable with what you're doing. For example, I was no longer comfortable going to the liquor store for my husband. It was
Right.
just kind of an unspoken routine that we got into. I would go to the liquor store for him. And at some point, I wasn't comfortable with that anymore. So I had to say, I'm not doing this to punish you, but this is how it makes me feel. And I just don't want to do that anymore. Boundaries didn't mean for me that, oh, you're still drinking, so I'm just taking the kids and I'm leaving. I think, an appropriate boundary would be, we're not going to have heavy discussions when you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
That would be, an appropriate boundary, because we're not getting anywhere with this. So I think when you set boundaries, you have to think about, well, what is your end goal?
Yeah.
So
And
not just setting boundaries just to set boundaries, just to say and assert power and say and control and say, this is how it's going to go, but to think about your end goal. So with me saying, we're not talking about this when you're intoxicated. We will have a conversation when you're sober. So you can come back and have a conversation with me during that time. That was for a purpose. We were not getting anywhere talking about these things when he's not going to remember. So it wasn't about control. It was about, this is what's best for both of us here in this situation.
yeah, that underlying intention, the goal that you have, that's mutually beneficial. And here's what I'm willing to do or not do, or here's what I'm willing to engage with, not engage with. For you, right? You're not controlling the other person. These are the boundaries for me
Yeah.
based on my feelings and my needs, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And boundaries also help with communication. Also, you're communicating your why. So I think that's helpful, um for both of you.
Yeah. It's really
Sure.
good.
Yeah.
It's really good. I wanted to ask about so betrayal trauma is something I've talked about on the show
Okay.
before, and it's a big topic. Betrayal trauma in spouses often creates a constant walking on eggshells kind of
Mhm.
feeling, right? Which you were experiencing, I'm sure, in this whole dynamic. So, what practical tools help partners break free from that cycle and create stability for themselves? I think we've talked about some of that, but um, I think I also wonder just maybe some of the conclusions that you came to of how to step out of that I'm walking on eggshells type of scenario, or I need to do everything that he says, or just play along and be passive. Maybe. Um, what are a couple of those shifts that you think that spouses kind of need to go through to approach things differently?
First of all, boundaries.
Yeah, back to boundaries, right? There you
Boundaries. Yeah.
go.
Boundaries are
Yes.
important, and boundaries can also be, what you will tolerate as far as how you're treated. So, and that's part of the walking on eggshells. So, if you're going to name call, or if you want to be rude to me, then the conversation stops here. We can pick it back up later at X time. But,
Yeah.
I'm done with this conversation if that's what you're going to do. So setting those boundaries so that eliminates some of the walking on eggshells, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be in that bad of a mood, then I'm going to remove myself, or you can remove yourself, and we will see each other later. I will
Yeah.
be over here, or you can be over there. So that as well. I think also meeting the person where they're at and really having a good understanding. Recovery isn't linear, right? It's not, it's sometimes it's two steps forward and one step back. Sometimes it's 3 steps forward and 3 steps back, and you feel like you're at 0 again. You're always inching forward, but I think having a good understanding and, again, talking with your team and having a good sounding board and understanding this addiction will help you, because I think a lot of people struggle with the expectations. They have their own expectations as to where we should be now. It's been 3 months since we've talked about you have an issue, and so therefore, gosh, it's been 3 months. Shouldn't we be over this by now? And that can definitely create a lot of tension and letdown.
And then it's heaping even more pressure on the one who's struggling with addiction, which is really, it's a part of the addiction as a whole. For those of us who struggle with addiction, we have this often unconscious kind of emotional pressure of, I need to be this person and put on this mask and put on that front and look a certain way and meet all these different standards and achieve all these things. Whether or not we're doing all of that, we feel this perfectionistic kind of tension for so many of the men that I've worked. It's like without fail, every time it's there without them realizing. And when I then approach with pressure, right, now it's just matching that inner critic they already have internally.
Yeah.
It's not assisting in the process. So I think that's really good. You speak a lot about scripts. In fact, you have some free ones, some free resources on your site, I think, right? Scripts for spouses to use, specific words people can use in hard conversations. Could you share maybe a bit of an example of a script that helps a spouse confront denial, right? You often face denial, and we can face denial of our spouse saying, I don't have an issue,
Yeah.
or this defensiveness. To confront that denial without escalating into the shame or the defensiveness and,
Yeah.
and feeding that.
Well, I don't, yeah. So what I do in the book is I go through role play scenarios. I take you through role play scenarios. Well, I don't have
Yeah,
those memorized. I definitely do,
totally.
because resistance, you'll meet resistance all along the way, and it's not just once. And so going into it knowing that is important, right? And that's part of what you just talked about, is how do we stop walking on eggshells? Well, we have to, if you know that that's coming, then you can prepare with how you're going to respond, right? If you know that that's happening and you understand that that's just part of the disease process, then
Yeah,
we're not going to be as shocked, upset. We're not going to be as reactive. We're going to know that this is coming, and we're going to be prepared with, this is how we're going to respond. And so that's why I was talking earlier about, and this would apply in the situation, um, when he says, I don't have a problem, that's when you ask, those open-ended questions, those leading questions, and you're leading them to, I have a problem. They're talking about everything but the problem. The loss of the job, the loss of relationship, the strain in relationships, that maybe, being on, the last straw with their boss at work, whatever it is, there are natural consequences that occur when someone is in addiction. And so while it's not helpful to point the finger, right, what we want to do is to get them to, over time, see their own reflection and to see that this is an issue, and you can lead them to it. And over time, they will see that. Also, positive reinforcement. So with addiction, we talked about how, you know, th- they're getting their comfort, and they believe that when they, consume porn or drink alcohol or do whatever it is, um, that they have an addiction to, whenever they consume that, they think that that's the answer, and their brain believes that that is what's needed in that moment when they feel that anxiety or, right, that need to go back to whatever it is, the porn, the alcohol, the drugs. Over time, you can rewire the brain. And so at home, you can help with that. So positive reinforcement when this other reward becomes greater and more important to them over time, and they get the same feel good feeling from that they do the alcohol, and they're probably going to choose this.
Mhm.
So
'Cause it doesn't have
rewarding
the
for
long
those
term, it's like both short-term and long-term benefits, right? Rather
right.
than long-term consequences that they don't like with their health, etcetera, right?
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So, the research proves that yes, over time the brain can rewire. So, but it takes repetition and it takes time. So, what you can do at home is recognize every small step forward. Now, small step forward does not mean necessarily everyone's different. But it's very rare that it means, oh, he didn't log on at all this week and consume any porn, or I don't see alcohol in the house anymore. That's not the case. Most of the time, a small step forward could be he's now opening up in conversations. He before was resistant. He wouldn't talk about anything. But now he's opening up to me. He's talking to me about, the core issues. And I feel like we're really getting somewhere as far as uncovering the why. That's a step forward. Agreeing to go see a doctor, because a good window of opportunity method that I like to use, I call it the window of opportunity method. Once you start uncovering, their why, and, they're starting to see that, um, okay, when I do this, this is the reward I get. And I like that. And okay, I am starting to see that maybe my behavior is affecting, my job, or, they're going to be more up to going further in the conversation. And it still may mean that they're not saying yes to treatment. That could throw them in a complete tizzy. But what you can do is use it as a window of opportunity. So, for example, Steve talked a lot about anxiety, and he was afraid of the medications, and he definitely didn't want to go back to treatment. So I used that as a window of opportunity to say, well, there was a family doctor that he had gone to since he was little. I said, Dr. Barrett. I went to see Dr. Barrett after I had, our middle child, and I struggled with depression, postpartum depression. And he was so helpful to me. And you know how I feel about medication. I didn't want to go on medication either, but this is what he did for me. And I think that if you go see Dr. Barrett, he could have some helpful solutions for you. So that was the window of opportunity for him to say yes to go see someone. And of course, behind the scenes, I'm calling Dr. Barrett and I'm saying, giving him the rundown. And uh, I'm calling our insurance to find out who's in network. And I'm doing all that work behind the scenes because I know that when he gets to see Dr. Barrett, the Dr. Barrett is going to, maybe not that same appointment, but in a future appointment, he's going to get him to an intake meeting. And that he is going to be the person, this middle person, to help get him back into treatment. And so, we don't always come to the conclusion that we need to go to treatment at home, or that we need to agree to therapy, or, whatever the recommended treatment is, depending on the addiction, that all happens at home. But these are some things that we can do at home to get them there. And that window of opportunity method is really effective.
That's great. If you could give one piece of advice to a wife who's listening right now, or a partner who's listening right now, who feels broken by
Yeah.
betrayal trauma and
Mhm.
unsure of what to do next, what would that message be for them?
The first piece of advice I would give would be to trust your own gut instincts, because I feel like that is why we went so deep in the first place into addiction and things got so far, because I didn't trust myself. I looked to him the whole time, and I constantly pointed the finger at myself. And like we talked about, this unintentional gaslighting and manipulation, it happens in every addiction, really almost in every confrontational scenario, even outside of addiction. That's just a common defense response. And so in those moments, because I actually thought like, wait, am I crazy? I think I might be the problem. To recognize that you can trust your gut instincts, you can trust yourself. And once you do that, then you can move forward with, the next steps in helping yourself heal and helping your loved one if you choose that you want to be the person to do that. But that's really important. Trusting yourself and trusting your own instincts. That's huge. I would say your loved one is not your sounding board. That's another important thing. I think a lot of people are looking at their spouse or the person that their partner that they're close with at home, and they are using them as their sounding board. That's not a good idea. That's just going to create conflict, stress in the house. You're not going to get the validation that you're looking for from that person that's struggling. So, yeah, it's not going to happen. So you're just going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to create more anxiety and more, mental health stress for yourself. So get someone that you can talk to. If you don't feel like you can talk to family and friends, then you need to get a therapist that is not just a general therapist. I would say one that does specialize in whatever type of addiction that this person is dealing with. And another thing, there are therapists that specialize in the craft method. And the craft method that I talk about in my book, and the other methods that I talk about in my book and that I share, they're not just alcohol specific. I think some people look at my book and say, "Oh, it's just to help alcoholics." No, these methods are for any addiction type. And the reason that I recommend these craft trained therapists is, or anyone that kind of has a similar method is the whole detach method. That's old school. I would run if someone told me that, that I need to detach, because not everyone can. First of all, let's just say that not everyone that lives with an addict can leave. Even if they wanted to, not everyone can leave. And so detach, what do you mean? He's on my couch right now, right? Like that's not going to work. When I go home, he's there. And so that's just not helpful. And then also there are many that they don't want to. They're like, wait a minute, I think there's a better way. I don't know what it is, but there's got to be a better way, and a way that I can help this person. And so I don't want to detach. And so I would run for the hills if I went to a therapist and that was the message. Not because this person is being malicious to try to tear families, because this person isn't well trained and they don't have methods and strategies to share with you that are going to work and be effective. They don't have the answers. So go to someone that does.
That's really good. And I've talked about this on the show previously, but I know for me, as someone who's struggled with addiction, I was addicted to pornography, and I was also had substance use addictions. And it's been years for me since all that. But when I got married, and that was about a decade ago, I didn't realize that I still had much of the addictive mindset, where I was hyper, all about productivity, and I was a workaholic, and it was constant nonstop with that. I was addicted to nutrition and exercise. So I was exercising for, an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. And I was so meticulous with everything that I ate, and it had to look exactly this way. And my mind was so caught up in all of this, just so fixated and obsessive. And I know for my wife, she just really felt like I wasn't present emotionally.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. And when she, a number of years ago, started to say, look, and get real about how I was showing up in the relationship and being very straightforward about that, establishing those boundaries, right? Rather than just the walking on eggshells, or just think, okay, maybe I'm because you were talking about instinct, trusting your instinct. When she
Mhm.
started to say, something is not right here, and this is what I'm experiencing, and here's what I'm not okay with,
Yeah.
that really brought a lot out into the light where I was like, gosh, I guess I'm really not here in the ways that she needs. And because I had just continued kind of my patterns and things that I'd gotten used to throughout my life. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And until she was very straightforward, no nonsense, I'm not saying that the judgment, right, is needed, right? And then there's that often is messy. It can be messy, but just the trusting your instincts and being real about, I actually am experiencing this. This is not all in my head
Right.
is so important, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I think the last thing that I'll say, and then we'll point people where they can go if they can get in contact with you or find out about your book, et cetera. But
Mhm.
if you could give one piece of advice directly to a man, perhaps, or woman who's listening that is struggling with pornography addiction or another addiction, what would you say to them?
Never been asked that question.
I thought you might not have been. How can they best help their spouse? Because a lot of the men who listen, they know that they have an issue, but they also have a lot of blind spots.
Yeah.
Um, what do their spouses most need from them?
I'd say one is to, a couple of things could be helpful. I know, I know one thing that's not helpful from a spouse to, towards the addict is when you come to them with, here's five things, or you don't say here's five things, but you like start spouting off all the things you want them to fix, and they just don't hear you anymore. And so, one thing I learned is I'm going to come to you with one thing I want you. I just need this one thing from you. And so on the flip side, go to your partner and say, you know, I, I I don't have all the answers as to how I can fix this and make this better for you right now. It's something I struggle with, but what's just not 10 things, what's one thing that I can do for you today? Just one.
Yeah, it's
Just
good.
one thing. Give me one thing to work on. And one thing to work on doesn't mean cure it today, right? It's just like, what's one like small step I can take for you today? And if you could every day just tell me one thing to work on today,
Yeah,
and I can focus on that, right? Because it's just like anything else. Like if you have 100 pounds you want to lose, and someone says, well, you just need to, they start, well, you need to start running 5 miles a day, and you need to, it's like, what's one thing I can do today so I can just get closer? And tomorrow, tell me one step, and let's just take this into bite-sized bits more
yeah,
so that it's manageable.
yeah. And I think that openness is so important, and being able to step forward and say, have the humility to say, I know I need to change and I know I need to improve. But also, as you're saying, not overloading myself
Yeah.
with a billion things at once. It's not going to happen.
It's not effective, and it leaves both of you feeling overwhelmed and back to square zero of,
Mm,
okay, I don't know what to do, I guess. I guess I just won't do anything today. I guess, I guess I'm so overwhelmed, I'll just go have a drink then.
yeah,
Right? Or
yeah.
so I think that's really where it leads, instead of, like I said, I need, I really need to dumb this down. Like, please just give me one small step I can take today. And then when I master that, give me another one, and let's build.
Hmm. Yeah, the small and simple things. It's the most
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, Holly. I love it. I think that so much of this will be so helpful to so many people. So, if people want to get in contact with you, they want to find your book, et cetera, where should they go?
Go to thehardesthelp.com. So on thehardesthelp.com, my website, you'll find my social media, you'll find the link to the book, you'll find resources. my email, everything is on thehardesthelp.com.
And there's a lot of awesome resources on there, by the way. I was on your site checking it out, and I was amazed at just how quality and practical those resources are there. So,
Thank you.
yeah, good place for people to start. So, thank you so much for coming on, Holly. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.